ignition, and go Falcon, go Polaris.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of StarCast from Planet Waves. Today's edition is for September 11th, 2024. I'm Eric Francis Coppolino, your friendly neighborhood astrologer, here with a bit that is really relevant today because it's the anniversary of September 11th, and yesterday was the launch of this somewhat momentous SpaceX flight. That's like private space flight, though space flight has really always been private. NASA really just hires a bunch of private contractors. The moon landing was largely done by Grumman and other contractors. They just called it a NASA program. Now, in the spirit of kind of openly corporatized government, we credit the corporations themselves. So before I get into the astrology, there's something I've just been thinking that's kind of been on my mind for the last hour as I prepare this presentation for you, which is that astrology is a terrible thing if you are not curious and excited about life, if you don't want to learn and explore and stop and think. And it's a difficult time for that because we are confronted by so much is thrown at us, so much that is completely irrelevant, that is designed to enrage people, enrage you, get your attention by pushing your buttons and grabbing you by the hair and dragging you into something you don't even really want to think about or feel about, and so much that is absolutely, completely irrelevant, politicized, etc., etc. And at least the way that I do astrology, and in particular this branch of my astrology, it's called mundane astrology, astrology of the world. This is about how interesting life is. It is about the beauty of the experiences that we have. And it is about the beauty of this art form, not a science, an art form known as astrology. And if all that turns you off, you're in the wrong place. There's plenty you can do. There are plenty of places that you can get your buttons pushed, but this is not one of them. And this kind of a subject is something that brings in so much, as you'll hear, so many different aspects of life come into this one little feature in a chart that I am going to describe. Now, today is the anniversary of the September 11th incident. I believe it would be the 23rd anniversary, if we can believe that the 2 decades plus 3 years have passed us by since that day that not only changed the world, but also changed our attitudes about life and brought in the digital age that essentially stripped us of physical reality and our concept of reality, and where we're suddenly living in a world where the most absurd, obscene things were possible, such as the demolition of the World Trade Center. Maybe it's different if you never saw it. Maybe you never went up there. Maybe if you never had dinner up in the lunch. My mom took me up to lunch at Windows on the World and the World Trade Center. I was personal friends with the Saucier. It was a French restaurant, the Saucier at the Windows on the World, who taught me how to cut an onion, Patrick Sullivan. My friend at the Miracle Manor Spiritual Community. One of my dad's girlfriends brought me up to the World Trade Center. She was up there. She worked for Morgan Stanley, and we went up to her office. She had me come in. We went up to her office, and she took me in a supply room, Morgan Stanley supply room, and we turned off the lights and sat in the dark in a supply room in the World Trade Center and heard and felt the building sway. It would sway 10 feet as part of its normal architectural design so that it could stay up. It had to be flexible. As a child, on divorce weekends, going back and forth to Manhattan with my dad from Brooklyn, we would go past the World Trade Center being constructed. maybe if you didn't have those kind of personal connections to it, you don't really appreciate the reality of it, the beauty of those structures, and the wound to New York City, which always seems to bear the brunt of global crisis and crisis in the United States. Maybe it wouldn't matter as much. But the World Trade Center was something real to me. It was something that I personally appreciated, and that was part of my life. Like Madison Square Garden, like and all the things that are the places that we remember as children that are meaningful. But it was also a symbol of world power. It was a symbol of achievement of the human race. And so to see this thing just collapse one day, and then to have this absurd story where it's blamed on a guy in a cave in Afghanistan, perfectly outrageous. And not a single astrologer did not get up and run to their computer and cast the chart on the morning of September 11th. I was sick in bed. It took me till early afternoon, and I was on the West Coast, so it happened, 8, 9, 10, 11. I guess I got the call at about 10, 7, I don't know. I forget. I'm having trouble with the time zone directions. My friend Neil McDonough called me up and explained what was going on. I was not feeling well. He woke me up from deep sleep, and he was right. I would rather have heard it from him than from the TV news, and he knew that. That's why he called me up. All right, so I have read this chart many times. I've included a resources area with this post toward the bottom a little bit, beneath the chart for the SpaceX launch, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And I have done this chart 16 ways from Sunday, and have looked into the technology behind the whole incident, and have included in this my interview last year with Richard Gage, a professional architect and the founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, an organization of thousands of architects, professional engineers, and everyone with a BA or above in architecture and engineering can sign on to this petition demanding a new investigation into how these buildings were said to have fallen down when they were either hit by an airplane or not hit by an airplane. Remember, buildings 1 and 2 were struck by an airplane. Impossible to take down buildings of that integrity merely by striking them with an airplane at the top of the building, because the whole building's held up by the bottom, obviously, not the top. And then on September 11th at 5:20 or so, World Trade Center 7 just falls down, and they say, well, it was just some office fires, okay, that made World Trade Center 7 collapse in its footprint. All right, all of that said, and that's all included at the bottom. In 2012, let's see, September 11th happens in 2001, so 11 years into my looking into this, and it was more or less a continuous exercise of mine over a long period of time to keep looking into this. I did a more thorough reading of asteroids for the initial strike of Flight 11 into Tower 1, the North Tower of the World Trade Center. And I used a tool called Serennu, SERENU.com by Tracy Delaney, an old Planet Waves astrologer and editor who wrote an asteroid casting program that is one of the best in the business. It is second only to Solar Fire, and tied for the best tool on the internet with a thing that is now gone called the True Node Ephemeris. I fear that its author died. I was not in close contact with a man named John Dunn, not the poet, but the astrologer, who was a programmer who programmed this thing. But Tracy Delaney programmed the Serennu, SERENNU. That's some kind of a Welsh word for serenity. And I did a search of 1,000 asteroids. And when you look at 1,000 asteroids, because they don't usually cast 150, when you cast it for 1,000 asteroids, you can look at every degree of the zodiac, and pretty much every degree is going to have something in it, or most of them will. And you can go to 5,000 if you can't find it in 1,000. The distinction of the World Trade Center chart, the very distinct thing about it, is that at the moment that Flight 11 struck the World Trade Center, Mercury was rising to the degree, and that degree was 15 degrees of Libra, 14 and change Libra. Mercury is right there. Mercury, the winged god, the god of flight, the messenger, exactly rising. Now, modern young astrologers would say, oh, this is proof that it was planned by astrology, but that is a complete inversion of the concept of astrology, which is about reading the nature of events, not assuming that anything is planned. And I assure you, none of these astrologers have ever so much as tried to plan a wedding, because if you try to plan a wedding astrologically, a client comes in, pays $500, do the chart for the wedding, find the perfect chart for the wedding, and the catering hall says, sorry, no can do. Or the maid of honor has to, oh, she has to be on vacation or whatever the case, has to work assignment. No. So electional astrology is very hard, and it's not the way the world works. So Mercury rising in the 9/11 chart, and this was in an astounding situation where it was exactly 120 degrees exactly trine Saturn at 15 degrees of Gemini, 14 and change Gemini. And Mercury and Saturn were occupying one another's signs. Saturn exalted in Libra, Mercury rules Gemini, exact to the degree you can switch their places. That's called mutual reception by degree. And that's the thing in the chart that says the government, Saturn, and the terrorists, Mercury, are the same thing. And I looked at that chart and I thought, I didn't actually have the chutzpah to come right out and say that. So I said a number of other things in that article. It was also one of the, you're always at the beginning of this kind of astrology. You learn something from every single chart. Nothing is a repeat. So anyway, finally, I cast a chart with 1,000 asteroids, and exactly conjunct Mercury is this asteroid called Sauer, Sauer. Sauer, what on earth is that? It's asteroid number 9248. Sauer. This is we're as I mentioned last week, there are now 1.3 million known bodies orbiting the sun. At the time Sauer was named, sometime probably in the 21st century, it got a relatively low number, 9248 Sauer. Well, what the heck is this? So I had to go looking around. It wasn't, it gets progressively easier, harder, easier. It's not progress. There's a kind of a cycle of being able to find certain information online. And there's little moments where things are easy to find and then they become difficult to find. And anyway, I tracked down what this thing was named after. It's not important enough to get a Wikipedia article, and it turns out that it was named for Dr. Carl G. Sauer, Sauer. He was a rocket scientist for the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, part of Caltech, one of the very important NASA contractors that gets all kinds of major missions, and in addition to other things like the Southwest Institute, which did the mission to Pluto, I'm sure with help from JPL. So it turns out that asteroid Sauer is not named for the river in Belgium, which that's like probably one of the most famous references in sauerkraut. No, it's named for a famous astrophysicist who calculated the trajectories of rockets to asteroids and comets. That's what his job was. This is what you can get paid for if you're really good at some very specific science. And I don't think there's a lot of people in the world who had his job, but that's what he did. And I'm certain, even though I could never talk to him and I could never get JPL to admit anything about him. I looked, I tried. There is nothing about him except what's written in his obituary, that he not only developed the specific instructions for how to get to the Earth, to a distant small planet by rocket from the Earth with everything moving. It's not easy, obviously. That's why it's rocket science. He developed the methodologies for how to do that, the formulas for how to do that. And after a while, you take a very difficult thing and you make it easier, and the knowledge gets passed along. So I thought this is very interesting symbology to have the asteroid named for a flight engineer exactly conjunct Mercury, the fleeting winged god and the representative of the terrorists and the message of the 9/11 incident, exactly rising. Now, when I say rising technically in astrology means that it's on the east side of the chart. That's 12 hours a day, right? Anything on the east side of the chart is rising. That's houses, basically, let's see if I can do this, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, and 3. That's all rising. But really, when I say rising, when most astrologers are rising, they mean very close to the ascendant, or in this case, exactly in the degree of the ascendant. There's 360 degrees, there's 24 hours in the day, and that can only be true for 4 minutes a day. This is why you have to love life to love astrology. Because you could say, oh, yawn, give me another Frappamacca mochaccino. Or you can think, wow, to be rising, something has to kind of occur within a 4-minute interval. Plus, Mercury's moving and Sauer's moving, and those two are not aligned for very long. Mercury goes quickly. So you've got to have Sauer's orbit, Mercury's orbit, and the ascendant all aligned, and that's 4 minutes, and those are the 4 minutes in which Flight 11 struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center and completely changed the world. Okay, so what does that mean? I mean, it means, to me, it says that, first of all, it's a very interesting synchronicity, and second, it talks about the depth of the engineering required to pull off something like 9/11. It takes a lot of engineering to do that. And it turned out to be a different kind of architectural engineering and the engineering of controlled demolition. But nonetheless, it was engineering. I'm sure there was a lot of CGI involved. I'm starting to doubt the veracity of the images that were shown on the news. I have seen personally video of the news reports announcing the collapse of World Trade Center 7 prior to the collapse. This is on both Fox and BBC. Jane Stanley famously standing in front of World Trade Center 7, announcing that it had fallen down in a live stand-up, and the building is right there. On Fox, they've got the projection of the New York skyline on a green screen behind the journalists. The journalists are watching on a monitor. They get the breaking news bulletin, and they say, more tragic news from New York City. World Trade Center 7 has fallen down. But it's right there in the live shot behind them. Then it falls down. And the guy says, oh, there it goes now. Never breaks irony. He announced that it fell down. It hadn't fallen down. And then he says, there it goes now. Now, if you are not interested in life, if you think one thing is like another and everything is like something else, and all that matters is how much foam you have on your latte, this is going to be fucking stupid. It's going to be boring. You're not going to care. It's going to challenge your worldview. But if you think life is interesting, if you think that, and I don't mean the things that terrorize you, because that's not really interest. With QAnon and watching 1,000 videos about the economy collapsing, that's not interesting. That's just terrorism. It's fear and it's stupid. But if the way things actually happen to you is intriguing, this is intriguing. So there are lots of ways the deception shows up in the 9/11 chart. Those very exact trines plus mutual receptions can be very slippery and deceptive. So I write all about, I've got a lot of this written about in various 9/11 posts. I've included a bunch of resources areas, including various programs on Planet Waves FM, and my video interview last year with Richard Gage, the founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And you can hear me with 20 years experience covering 9/11 question one of the world's leading architectural experts on what happened on 9/11 is there for you to see as part of this post. All right, now let's go to the SpaceX launch yesterday. So this launch was, I mean, I hate to sound cynical, and it's kind of cool in a way, but, Elon Musk is and one of the leading guys involved in launching things into space. And he's got aspirations to go to Mars and all of this stuff. So his company, SpaceX, which is kind of like Twitter, only involves rocket ships, launched a mission called Polaris Dawn yesterday in one of his Falcon 9 rockets. That's like a Tesla, but it's a rocket ship, on Tuesday morning at Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral. It used to be called Cape Kennedy. So it's Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral. Got photo of that launch. And we assume this is true, right? I have not been in the room when this was happening. I was not aboard the ship. So we're making the assumption that this happened. It's a fairly safe assumption because it doesn't really affect us very much. But we do have astrology to help us determine, assess the different scenarios. So I saw this on the cover of the New York Times today, and they gave the time, which is God's invitation to anyone who's an astrologer to cast the chart. This is how you learn astrology. You can't be lazy. You cast every single interesting chart. That's it. You just keep going. You don't wait a month. You do it right on the spot. So I cast the chart, and very interesting. Okay, this is kind of a chart. Let me see what we've got going on here in this chart. A couple of interesting. The first thing I thought was, well, it sure is a good thing they didn't do this in late January or early February. All of the NASA missions where someone has died, and there have been several of them, 1, 2, 3, at least 3, maybe more, all took place in late January or early February. I have not talked to an astrologer who understands how that happened. There are no fixed stars of any relevance to this matter in that region of the ecliptic. There is nothing there that anyone could say, well, that was conjunct, that. Plus, it's about a 7-day window from approximately January 28th, which was the Challenger, to around February 1st or 2nd or something. There was the Columbia disaster and there was the Apollo 1 disaster. In both cases, the entire crew of the mission was lost. So, very nice. They did it in late summer in the Northern Hemisphere. And Mercury also rising, but it's in Virgo. The ascendant is Leo, but Mercury's close to the ascendant. And I noticed, 25 Leo is rising, and that is nice, exact trine to Eris, and a close trine to Chiron. All right, and all that Virgo is the second house, because it's Leo rising, so all Virgo is the second house. Lots and lots of money involved here. All right, so and then the moon is in Sag. That's got a lot to do with flight. Sagittarius was the sign involved when the Wright brothers flew. It's always good to check the historic Wright brothers flight. And I will add to this collection my one of my astrological masterworks, which is the my 50th anniversary of the moon landing, before I send this thing out. All right. So I'm like, all right, that's nice. I also noticed Uranus in the 10th house, innovation breakthrough, technology breakthrough. This is it's like hackneyed. It's like cliche. Uranus represents science. Wow. Okay. So not satisfied with that, I went into Serenu.com and I cast the asteroids and I set the thing for a 90-degree sort where you can see everything that lines up in the cardinal signs together, the mutable signs, and the fixed signs together. So, for example, you'll see in the listing of the asteroids to the left in the chart that we get, for example, Hermes, 24 Aquarius, Pramzeus, 25 Leo, Sauer, 25 Leo, Hidalgo, 25 Scorpio. All the fixed signs are grouped together in the order, so you mainly see squares, conjunctions, and oppositions together. That's what a 90-degree sort is. And it turns out, you can see, plain as day, that asteroid Sauer 9248 is rising at 25 Leo 34. The ascendant is 25 Leo 03. It's in the same degree. Wow. Asteroid Sauer is rising in the launch of the Polaris Dawn SpaceX launch. And it's one day away from the 9/11 anniversary. In fact, I read about it on the 9/11 anniversary. So that's interesting. The asteroid associated with a flight dynamics engineer, astrophysicist, is exactly rising in the Polaris Dawn chart. And that might argue for, well, I guess this is probably true. Now, the only problem with that assumption is that when you look at all of the science and technology behind the moon landing and you start asking real questions, you find out that nothing works out. Nothing adds up. You find out that photographic film cannot work unless it's in a pressurized vessel. Photographic film peels apart like lasagna in a vacuum, and so they could not have been using ordinary Hasselblad cameras, which they claim to be doing, in a vacuum. The film, and they were using pretty much ordinary Kodak film. It doesn't work. And there's 100 things like that. But the astrology looks great, and they could not have been planning it that way because there were things that none of these, that nearly no astrologer knows about. To be able to, when you really bear down and study the astrology, you've got to get very technical about it, right? So the astrology seems to confirm the moon landing. It is some elaborate synchronicity. It's almost as if it was so well done as if to kind of match the cosmic signature, unless you start looking about, does film work in a vacuum? You ask a simple question like that. My question is, how does spacesuit work? How do electric work? How big was the battery that they used to got that then there? Why do they only have like a 25-page manual for the for the lunar module, the LEM, when you'd really need like a 250,000-page manual for the LEM? It wasn't 25 pages, but it was in the hundreds or low thousands of pages when you would really need like a 250,000-page technical manual to make that machine run, to deploy on the moon, to support life for how many days, and then launch back up to the command service module, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not nearly enough technical data to do that. But the chart looks good. The charts look incredible. The charts are beautiful. And by the way, in case you're at a party and there happens to be one other person interested in astrology who knows something other than his birth sign, the trivia question is, what sign was the moon in when man walked on the moon? Libra is the answer. When man walked on the Libra moon, my article is called. So I am not saying that this intersection of Sauer at 25 and change Leo aligned with the ascendant of 25 and changed Leo only for 4 minutes a day. And those exact 4 minutes are the ones where this was launched actually means something in and of itself. There are also times, plenty of them, where I cast a chart like this and I see what's going on. And I have to sit with it for some days and sometimes for years. My file of NASA charts is quite old, and I'm very happy that I found my master file of NASA charts, which include things like the first launch of the shuttle, the first launch of the Challenger, the first launch of the Columbia, the Apollo 1 disaster, the Apollo 13 disaster. All I've got charts for all of these things, and I sometimes feel like I'm in a world where, like, who really cares? I mean, cares enough to take the time, cares enough to like buy the product so that the astrologer, in this case me, can really do the work and feel good about doing the work. I'm reading a book that I just happened to find out about because I'm doing Chiron research for the 2025 annual edition of Planet Waves called The Awakening, which is a lot about Chiron. We are going into a very, very big Chiron year. And one of the first astrologers to work on Chiron was a man named Al H. Morrison. close friends with Debbie Kempton Smith, and he kind of leads the charge on Chiron. Zane Stein wrote the first book about Chiron, but Al Morrison published it, and he was kind of a curmudgeonly, very intelligent, open-minded, very intense dude. He was one of these guys you loved him or you hated him. And I'm reading along. It's like a collection of someone loved him enough, and this person deserves, as both human being and astrologer, to collect his work, including various courses and classes and lectures and mountain astrologer articles and his commentary and his publication, the CAO Times, and various different things that he published over the years, and gather it all together in a book because he never wrote a book. And I'm reading this thing with tremendous interest. The first thing I went to were his commentaries on Chiron. And remember, this was really the first astrologer to tackle Chiron. Zane Stein was right at the beginning, Ermini Lantero right at the beginning, but it was Al who thought this is relevant. We must do this. He gathered a group, he started a publication, and he published Chiron, Essence and Application by Zane Stein. And I'm reading along, and he is, first of all, highly technically astute. I'm sure that he could calculate a chart by hand in 45 minutes, which would take most astrologers like 5 hours to do it. And it wouldn't even be that accurate. And so he is mathematically proficient, and he is a philosopher and a great teacher and a great writer and speaker. And I'm thinking, who today would this even matter to? How today can you even get a conversation going about this? And the conversation is very important. The teacher is a teacher because they have students, and the students bring the fresh perspectives. The students bring the questions. The students bring the future to the teacher, and the teacher passes the wisdom of the past to the student. And that wisdom is often in the form of acquired knowledge. And the internet is absolutely brutal on acquired knowledge. It's like, who fucking cares? I'm an expert. I Googled it and I read the top thing on the top page, and now I'm an expert. And this, you see this going on like on Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's got this guy Googling things, and a topic comes up that they've never heard of, and the Google guy off to the side, some guy sitting next to the producer, Googles it and tells Joe Rogan what it means, and suddenly Joe Rogan is an expert. What a bunch of horseshit. So I'm reading this. I'm sitting in the diner eating breakfast with my paper splayed all over the table, taking notes on everything from my forthcoming April Fool's satire, which I'm always 6 months ahead of, and the 25 annual edition, and a bunch of other things, scribbling away in this book, The Collected Writings of Al Morrison, thinking, who cares besides me? And do people have the capacity to think about things for long enough to learn about them? But even that question is secondary to, is there actually any interest in knowledge of this depth, knowledge this sublime? And he's not so much talking about mundane astrology, which is what we've been doing in this. He's talking about, in the article that I was reading today, how a person is transformed by their ongoing Chiron transits. And I figured out way at the beginning. I was sitting in my apartment in Rosendale, the one where I wrote my first horoscope. My best friend in the world at the time was Dave Wilcock. And we're sitting there, and we reviewed the first 5 minutes of the first astrology reading I ever did for a client. And 5 minutes into this thing, we're looking at one another and thinking, there has got to be a better way. Wilcock is actually a very bright guy. He's extremely funny. We did some very funny satires together. I am so sorry to say that my friend lost his sense of humor and he lost his way. But at that time, we had a great time. So many funny, crazy things happen to us, synchronicities and so forth. So anyway, Wilcock and I are sitting there in my little apartment. Wilcock, by the way, typed in the first ever Planet Waves database. I read him the information off of various scraps of paper and emails, and he typed it into a FileMaker database, and that's where the Planet Waves database comes from. Thank you, Dave. So anyway, we listened to the first 5 minutes of my first reading, and I'm terrible. I sound like, I mean, it was my first reading. Okay, fine. But still, I'm like, no, this is not right. And maybe the client was being a pain in the ass saying, no, that's not true. No, that's not true. No, that's not true. So I thought, based on that experience, nah, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I thought, why don't I investigate the client's Chiron transits? Why don't I ask them about their chart rather than try to tell them about their chart? This fits the therapy model. It fits the humanistic astrology model developed by Dane Rudyard, where you meet the client for lunch and you talk to them about life for an hour before you read their chart, this kind of thing. So that's how I invent my Chiron method. Well, it turns out that Al Morrison was onto this in the 1970s. Al thought, well, this... As I've often said, astrology is much better for asking questions than it is for giving answers. If you have questions, if you care enough to have questions. Al Morrison had questions. And his method was ask the client what was happening in their life at the time of all of these major Chiron transits. And the way he puts it is that as you go through each of these transits, there is a mutational level change. The person is a different person. I would agree with that. That is my experience, and I've done this at least 1,000 times with clients. I do it to the present day. I'm about to start resuming readings. By the way, if you're waiting for your chart key reading or your second reading, I will slowly coming back into form. I'm not taking any new clients in 2024. I'm going to finish everybody up in 2024. And this is what I do, is I ask people about their Chiron transits, and it is amazing. It is deep. There is only one problem with this method, which is that if the astrologer lacks the sensitivity and the depth to go with the client where the client goes when they are talking about their Chiron transits, which are always deep, they are sometimes very painful, they are sometimes tragic events in the client's life, the astrologer can be out of their depth in a moment. So it takes, and then this is very bad for the client, because the client needs the astrologer to hold steady for them. The client needs the astrologer to not be out of their depth. And it turns out, fortunately, there are not many astrology students who are interested in hearing what the client has to say. There is a lot more money in telling the client what they want to hear. You make more money, you do less work, you blow smoke up the client's ass, and whether you're right or wrong, they always come back for more bullshit. But the other method is you really do the work with the client. And this was Al Morrison's method. And I wonder, here in 2024, at this late hour of history, who cares? Because what the internet has done, what digital consciousness, not the internet, digital consciousness is life is just splattered all over the world. Our interior life is splattered on the world around us. And we see everything as an external. And electricity eviscerates inner experience, actual inner experience. Maybe there's kind of an inner electrical drug trip. That is different than a sense of one's inner being. And this is largely created through the exposure to print technology, which deeply draws people into themselves and compels the use of imagination and being able to distinguish yourself from something in the world. And print lends itself very well to the mastery of subject matter. You have it right there in front of you. It has not gone fleeting by as in electrical media. And now, starting approximately 100 years ago with the advent of radio, and now taken to hyperbolic levels, with almost all communication being electrical, we have very little sense of our inner being left. And it is my intent as a communicator, and I recognize I'm basically stuck in the digital realm speaking to you, to use this opportunity to use the wild winter winds of our communication system to send tatters or fragments, borrowing from a starseed transmission, of a message of healing, and more than anything, a spirit of appreciating life, a spirit of being curious about your experience on Earth, something that is not driven by rage, by politics, by artificial intelligence, something that, when I present to you as I'm doing now, my intent is to draw you out a little bit and present you with something that you can be curious about, and to appreciate the process of your mind sorting out your reality and learning about yourself more than anything else. And that's what I have to say to you today on this 23rd anniversary of the September 11th tragedy that most people have still not processed. They've still not recovered from it. So I'll continue to offer information. Nothing new coming on this. I may do something new on the 25th anniversary in 2 years, but I've been at this for 2 decades, and I've put in the best of my body of work in case you are interested in what these charts are about and the engineering behind it all. I'm going to send this edition out for free. We have the subscriber editions that come out tomorrow with the horoscope for the Pisces, full moon, conjunct Neptune, and that includes the extended weekly horoscope, which is a work of philosophy, not of prediction. It's a 150, 170 word thing to help you think about your experience and to offer a little bit of opportunity for self-therapy and maybe a viewpoint and see life a little bit differently than you might ordinarily see it, and to have a moment of awakening from this digital dream or nightmare that is so thoroughly swallowing reality and making everything like everything else. But you are not. You are a distinct, unique creature in all of experience, in the entire history of humanity, and you cannot be replicated, cloned, backed up, uploaded, or anything else. All right, signing off from Kingston, New York at 1:10 p.m. Thank you for joining me. Please send this to a friend. Lots of love, and bye for now.